after 12 long years of isolation, they miraculously discovered my luxury home. An incredible reunion with my family's past. Jane Holloway stood at the wrought iron gates of the crumbling mansion that had once belonged to her estranged grandmother. The place was a ghost of opulence, shadows looming in the crevices of stone and ivy. It felt like walking into a mausoleum. Memories flooded her mind, memories weighted by isolation, sleepless nights spent at the hospital, and the sea of unanswered questions swirling around her and her ailing son, Alex. Should this place be a sanctuary for their future, or a painful echo of her family's past? Her heart raced as she was torn between the hope of a brighter horizon and the dread of unearthing buried family secrets. Inside, the air was stale, interrupted only by the muffled creaks of an ancient structure, tired and aching for recognition. The portraits that lined the peeling walls stared down at her, those somber faces trapping her in a past she barely understood. Each step deeper into the house felt like crossing a threshold, not just into rooms, but into the lives of generations who had been trapped in a cycle of greed, betrayal, and loss. What kind of legacy awaited her here? Was the fortune she long felt was stolen from her family just a stone's throw away? Or would she have to face the bitter truth that had haunted her lineage? Before she could lose her nerve, Jane stepped into the parlor, an ornate space now reduced to dust and shadows. The furniture seemed discarded, like dreams left unpursued. Among the debris, she stumbled upon letters tattered and faded, narrating sordid tales of manipulation by a neighbor whose shadow loomed large over their family's downfall. A surge of anger ignited within her. The injustice of it all struck like a hammer to her heart. Who was this villain walking untouched through their lives, while she and her son barely made ends meet? Would she have the strength to confront the legacy of entitlement that left them in ruins? Before she could spiral into despair, her thoughts flashed back to the retired professor from her town, a man haunted by the same memories Jane now faced. Their meetings ignited the flicker of hope, sparking in her a determination to piece together her family's narrative. What if they could expose the truth, and what repercussions would that have for Alex? The very people in her town who she had once trusted would reveal their true selves. How deep was their complicity in this fabric of deception? Tension gripped her heart, and her resolve strengthened. But so did the nails of fear that rattled her mind. Could she risk their already fragile life for a battle against power so deeply entrenched? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The impending neighborhood meeting loomed, an arena where confrontations would unfurl. Jane stood still as if time had frozen, the walls murmuring histories past as her family beckoned her to act. But just as she gathered her courage, a creak echoed through the empty hall. It erupted from the shadows, almost calling her name. She turned, her heartbeat surging, as her mind spiraled into a whirlpool of questions. Could she rewrite her family's story? Or would the ghosts of privilege continue to shackle her? In this moment, she was on the precipice, ready to leap into the unknown. But what awaited her on the other side? Jane felt the weight of history pressing down upon her as she stood frozen, bracing for the confrontation that awaited. The imminent neighborhood meeting held the potential to change everything, yet it also threatened to unravel the carefully stitched threads of her life. Memories flashed through her mind, each one a fragment of a past she couldn't escape. The professor's voice echoed in her head, urging her to stand firm and embrace her power to change the narrative, a power she had long suppressed. Navigating through rooms draped in dust, Jane attempted to absorb the stories tangled within the mansion's walls. Each letter she had found spoke of betrayal, but they also hinted at resilience. Her grandmother had fought fiercely for something greater than herself. Wasn't it that the legacy Jane wanted to reclaim? It was time for her to shed the cloak of isolation. She envisioned herself stepping into the meeting not merely as a survivor but as a challenger, ready to battle the injustices that had shackled her family for generations. As Jane prepared for the meeting, she reflected on her conversations with the retired professor. He had instilled in her an awakening, the whispering promise that knowledge could indeed alter fates. Details about the neighbor's scheming had started to unspool in her mind, exposing threats of corruption that could be her opening. Armed with these revelations, she felt a surge of purpose. Yet each time the fear crept in, would she be ready to stand toe-to-toe with the very people who had seemingly orchestrated her family's downfall? In the silence of the mansion, Jane glanced in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The reflection that stared back seemed unfamiliar. Was this woman willing to grasp the flames of truth, or would she extinguish them with doubt? The uncertainty churned within her, igniting a fire she hadn't felt in years. The risk was daunting. Yet she knew that doing nothing would be a betrayal to Alex, a choice that would seal their fate in the same cycle of pain and neglect. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Jane made her decision. Clutching the letters tightly in her hands, she felt their weight transform into her armor, a reminder of the stories waiting to be told. It was a pivotal moment, enough to bring her back from the abyss, she thought. But what if the neighborhood meeting turned into an ambush? A collision with the very man who had wielded power over her family? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. The sharp sound of a door closing somewhere in the house silenced her inner musings. Jane turned alert, her instincts on high alert. Shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own, testing her resolve. Gathering her thoughts, she registered the urgency of her whereabouts. It was no longer simply about legacy or family. It was about claiming her voice, no matter the cost. Would this meeting be the battlefield she envisioned, or merely a precursor to deeper entanglements she had yet to comprehend? With newfound ferocity, she stepped toward the door and into the unknown night, ready to confront the gathering storm. But as she reached for the doorknob, one final thought took root. What if she discovered there were allies in the very darkness she feared? Could the truth empower her in ways she could yet imagine, forging a future she dared not dream? The air pulsed with potential, both exhilarating and terrifying, as she prepared for the next chapter of her awakening. The brisk night air greeted Jane as she stepped out into the world, invigorating her senses. She inhaled deeply, tasting the tang of possibility mingling with the lingering scent of damp earth. The mansion loomed behind her like a specter, a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. As she walked towards the future, her heart drumming a battle rhythm, each beat propelling her forward. As she approached the venue for the meeting, an ordinary community center bathed in fluorescent light, she felt her resolve shake under the weight of anticipation. A part of her wanted to retreat into the shadows, to let someone else carry the burden of truth. But each step she took brought back flashes of her grandmother's fierce spirit, uncompromising, defiant. How could she deny that legacy now? Arriving at the entrance, she hesitated momentarily, her fingers brushing the doorframe. Would they see her? Not just as a victim of circumstance, but as someone embodying strength and tenacity. The moment her hand grasped the cold metal handle, the decision crystallized within her. It was time to emerge from obscurity. Inside, she quickly scanned the room filled with her neighbors' anxious chatter, their faces etched with anticipation and concern. The scent of stale coffee and wax floors infiltrated her senses. She felt small among the swirling crowd, each familiar face bringing with it echoes of judgment. But she straightened her back, summoning the energy she had cultivated since that pivotal conversation with the professor. Seated at the front was Ethan, the neighborhood bully masquerading as a community leader, his polished charm a veil for manipulative practices. Each time Jane's eyes landed on him, a sense of tightening urgency gripped her, a mounting tension waiting to erupt. She would not shy away this time. She had uncovered too much to let it slip away. As the meeting commenced, the discussions unfolded in a predictable pattern of complaints, half-truths, and passive-aggressive remarks. Jane's heart raced each time Ethan spoke, the way his words curled around the audience and ensnared them. It was a dance she had witnessed too often, one she was now desperate to break. Finally, driven by a force she didn't fully understand, she raised her hand, her voice trembling as she stood. "Excuse me, but I need to say something." The room quieted, eyes darting towards her, a harsh spotlight illuminating her every insecurity. Could she withstand this scrutiny? She took a deep breath, transforming her nerves into a steely resolve. For too long we've stood by and accepted the narrative. But I have discovered documents that reveal how some of us have been keeping secrets. Secrets that harm our community. The words poured out, laced with urgency, her voice nearly cracking from the weight of realization. Gasps fluttered through the crowd, a mix of disbelief and intrigue encapsulating their reactions. The revelation shocked her even more than it had surprised them. Pushing past her earlier apprehensions, she pressed on. We can no longer allow a single person to hold power over our choices or silence us. Ethan's face paled as he narrowed his eyes at her, the shift in the room palpable. In one bold move, Jane had inadvertently shifted the ground beneath them. With newfound energy coursing through her, she felt the flicker of hope igniting. Perhaps she was not alone after all. Yet the moment was brief. Ethan stood, a mask of feigned civility covering the fury brewing beneath. You dare to question our traditions, Jane? In an instant, she sensed the temperature of the room rising, alliances forming, tensions thickening, and the stakes climbing higher. The confrontation loomed, threatening to bring the very fight she had prepared for. But as she locked eyes with Ethan, Jane felt an unyielding clarity. The time had truly come to face the adversary she had dreaded, and perhaps in doing so, she would uncover allies she never expected to find. Just as she prepared to respond, someone familiar stepped forward from the shadows, intent on intervening. Jane's heart raced. This unexpected figure might change everything. Would they destabilize Ethan's control? Or would this only tighten the noose around her intentions? The figure emerged slowly, and Jane's breath caught in her throat. It was her old mentor, a woman named Clara. Jane hadn't seen her in years, but the memories of their time in the law program flooded back. Mornings spent poring over case files, afternoons discussing ethics over coffee, all while Clara emphasized the importance of integrity. Clara, Jane breathed recognition, giving her a modicum of courage. If anyone could cut through the tension, it was her mentor. Clara had always possessed a fierce intellect and an unwavering sense of right and wrong, traits that seemed to resonate in the current turmoil of the room. Before Jane could call out to her, Clara stepped in front of Jane, addressing the assembly with a commanding presence. Ethan, let us not pretend this is about tradition. This is about accountability. A murmur spread through the audience as whispers of astonishment mingled with curiosity. Jane steadied herself, feeling the strength of Clara's words wrap around her like armor. With renewed determination she added, we cannot dismiss the truth simply because it disrupts the illusion of stability. This isn't about tearing apart our community. It's about safeguarding our future. Ethan flashed a strained smile laced with contempt. And you think that he started, but Clara interrupted, her voice sharp and decisive. I think it's time the people of this neighborhood knew what's been concealed. No one is above scrutiny. The ground trembled beneath Jane's feet, as she realized the moment they shared marked a turning point. Clara's alignment felt like an endorsement, filling Jane with an unexpected buoyancy. They were no longer just two isolated voices against a manipulative figure. They were forging a united front, however small. Ethan's composure fractured, the facade cracking slightly as he sensed the shift in loyalty among his audience. I see how you've all been swayed, he sneered, his countenance darkening. You think a few words from a disgraced ex-lawyer, and a woman who's been absent can change anything? You are merely spouting baseless allegations. Jane felt her pulse quickening. This was not just about Ethan. This was about self-discovery. With every attack he launched at her and Clara, she felt the shivers of self-doubt creeping back. But instead of crumbling, each blow forged her resolve. She was stepping into her own power, fueled by both fear and defiance. Baseless? Jane challenged, finally allowing her voice the weight it possessed. The letters I found detail the decisions that have harmed not just us but future generations. They are not merely allegations, they are calls for justice. The shift in atmosphere was almost tangible. Jane could feel people leaning in, the energy of curiosity and solidarity flickering in the air, challenging the inertia Ethan had woven around the room. A few murmurs of agreement rose from those who had hesitated before. Clara nodded in affirmation. The first step in any community's healing is admitting its faults. If we choose to ignore the truth, we condemn ourselves to repeated mistakes. Jane focused on Ethan, causing the world around her to fade into the background. You've told us we should trust you, Ethan. Prove it. Open the doors for everyone to see what's really happening. We deserve transparency. Outwardly, it may have appeared to others as merely a confrontation, but internally Jane was navigating through a lush landscape of burgeoning self-worth, the remnants of doubt eroding away as conviction rose. Ethan's expression morphed into one of barely contained rage as silence enveloped the room. Clenching his fists, he leaned forward, slowly loosening the grip that had kept Jane and others in fear. Just as the intensity reached a peak, the meeting room door burst open. A newcomer stepped forward with urgency, holding a folder that was now the center of Jane's focus. What could it contain? Instinctively, she felt her heart race again, like a metronome marking time on the brink of a pivotal moment. Could this be the evidence that would lay Ethan's manipulation bare? Or was it another tool he would wield against her? The stakes had never felt higher as Jane prepared for what would come next. Would she overcome this final barrier? Or would she watch everything unravel before her eyes? The newcomer strode confidently into the room, a stark contrast to the tension that had enveloped the gathering. Jane felt a sudden shift in the energy as he approached the front, folder clutched tightly against his chest. The audience's attention pivoted towards him, and Jane's heart raced with vivid uncertainty. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was a defining moment, but would it be one of clarity or more obfuscation? With deliberate slowness, the newcomer unfolded the folder, revealing pages of documents that fluttered slightly, their contents obscured from Jane's view. Ethan's face contorted with irritation. She recognized that look of a man cornered. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice strained, revealing cracks in his previously unshakable confidence. "David Collins," the man announced, undeterred by Ethan's hostility. "I believe you know some of my work regarding local governance and community accountability." The name momentarily diverted Jane's focus from the folder. David was known for his rigorous investigative bylaws. He had made a name for himself by exposing corruption in public office. She sensed that this was a crucial ally stepping into the fray. "What's in the folder?" Clara asked, her voice smooth yet firm, a brush of urgency threading through her tone. David met her gaze unflinchingly. "Evidence. Documentation related to the governance practices spearheaded by our dear Ethan here." Ethan recoiled slightly, narrowing his eyes. "You think some allegations from a backroom gossip will deter me? You have no place here, Collins." David flipped open the first page, revealing names, dates, and a series of transactions that radiated disarray. "You'd be surprised how quickly gossip can become truth when backed by records," he retorted, steely determination threading his words. Peering over from behind Clara, Jane caught sight of the documents. The shock of what she found brought everything into immediate perspective. This was the tangible proof of Ethan's misdoings. She felt adrenaline surge within her. It was something she had only dreamt of finding. "Jane," David beckoned gently, sensing her urgency. "You need to see this. You were right. It all points to a pattern of deceit." Taking a step closer, Jane held her breath. She studied the written testimonies, her analytical mind dissecting every aspect. Fraud, manipulation, nefarious choices cloaked in the shadows of the local authority. Each revelation felt like a quiet thunderstorm building in intensity. "I can't believe it," she said softly, now grappling with an overwhelming mix of disbelief and empowerment. "All of this could change everything." "Yes." Clara's voice held a quiet intensity. "We need to confront this head-on. The question is how." Jane's mind raced, the implications of what this evidence presented crystallizing into a clear path. No longer would she simply be a voice among many. She could lead the challenge against Ethan and expose the truth that had beheld so many in ignorance. The fear that once shackled her began to dissipate under the weight of newfound identity and resolve. Just as she prepared to connect with her allies, Ethan erupted, his voice booming and desperate. "You think this is a game, don't you? You really believe you can uncover things that were meant to stay buried? Disgrace will follow you all. Disgrace belongs to those who choose deception over transparency." "Ethan," Jane shot back, courage swelling within her. "You're outnumbered now." Instinctively, she glanced at David and Clara, recognizing that her personal leadership was coming to the forefront. The room, once so laden with uncertainty, now crackled with the potential for change, ignited by clarity and intention. As she reached for the microphone, poised to command the assembly with the evidence and her growing authority, the door swung inward once again. This newcomer looked grave, a familiar face that sent shockwaves through Jane. Why had he come now, and what news did he bear that could shift the energy once more? Her heart raced, a surge of anxiety mixed with anticipation. Would this meeting culminate in victory or further chaos? The edge of uncertainty loomed large as she braced for whatever revelation awaited her. Jane's breath hitched as the door swung open wider, revealing Daniel a colleague she hadn't seen in years, his presence igniting a swirl of emotions within her. Daniel had once been a friend and confidant in the office, someone whose unwavering dedication to integrity made him an ally. But what was he doing here now when everything was at stake? "Jane," he said, his voice low and strained, pulling her focus away from Ethan and the tension thrumming in the room. "I had to come. You need to know something." He stepped forward, urgency threaded through his demeanor as he caught her gaze. "What's going on?" she asked, tension knotting her stomach. His eyes reflected something deeper, an understanding of the weight they were carrying. "Ethan's men are on alert. They've been watching you," he warned, voice urgent. "It's more than just business for him. It's personal. He won't let you get away with this without a fight." An icy tendril of fear slithered down Jane's spine, but at the same time, a wave of determination surged within her. She had come this far. There was no turning back. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. She had underestimated the gravity of the situation. It was no longer simply about corruption. It was a battle for her professional and personal survival. Watching Daniel's earnest expression, Jane felt an unexpected pang of guilt. "I wish I had known all of this before." "I didn't think you were doing what you believed was right," he interrupted. "But we can't underestimate Ethan. He's got resources and connections we may not even be aware of." Jane's mind flickered with anger. Ethan had manipulated the community for too long. She could feel the heat of resentment bubbling within her. He had taken advantage of her trust. "I need you with me, Daniel," she declared, steeling herself. "We have evidence that can turn the tide. I won't let intimidation dictate our actions." Clara, still beside them, nodded in agreement. "We've seen what he has done. It's time to use this knowledge to our advantage." Ethan scoffed, seemingly recovered from his moment of shock. "Is that it? You think a few documents will threaten me? The system is built to protect me, not you." His voice was embedded with arrogance, but Jane sensed a crack in that facade, a glimpse of fear flickering in his eyes. "Words spoken by a coward," Jane retorted, emboldened by her ally's presence. "This isn't just about you anymore." The mere acknowledgement of her authority reinforced her resolve. A sudden realization rushed through her. She had the capability to orchestrate this shift in power, to reclaim her narrative and steer the conversation away from intimidation and towards accountability. "Ethan," she called out, voice steadying as she turned toward him. "Your days of puppet mastery are over. Through this evidence, we will shed light on the truth and force accountability. No more shadows, just honesty." Her gut clenched with each statement, but there was invigoration within that fear. In the midst of the looming confrontation, the split between her old self fearful, hesitant, and her emergent identity bold, commanding drew starkly into view. Each choice she made layered her emerging identity. Capable, assertive, deserving of a voice. Just then, Daniel stepped closer, his presence reaffirming her resolve. "We can do this together. I've got your back." Taking a deep breath, Jane gathered her thoughts, but the urgency of their situation pressed heavily on her chest. "We move now," she stated decisively, feeling the pull of both excitement and dread. The foundations of her battle were crumbling beneath Ethan, and she wanted to stand on the precipice of confrontation. Yet, there remained an unnerving silence in the room. She could sense the uncertainty shifting to a tense anticipation, as if the universe was holding its breath along with them. Whatever was about to unfold, it would redefine everything they had fought for. As Jane's fingers gripped the microphone, her heart hammered with the question that ignited her thoughts. Could she truly challenge Ethan, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under his manipulations? The sound of her heart thumping became a drumbeat for change as she prepared to confront a truth that could shatter more than just the barriers around Ethan's facade. The sudden crash echoed from outside, drawing everyone's attention. What could it mean? The fragile threads of tension that bound them together now hung on the brink, ready to unravel. The chaotic sound of glass shattering sent a jolt through Jane's body, snapping her focus from the confrontation at hand. In that moment, the gravity of the situation loomed larger than ever, drawing her into a reality she hadn't anticipated. What had begun as a simple act of defiance had transformed into an all-consuming storm. She glanced around the room, the faces of Daniel and Clara reflecting a mix of concern and resolve. "What was that?" Clara whispered, her voice taut with anxiety. I don't know, but we can't let this deter us, Jane responded, a fierceness bubbling just beneath her surface. Igniting a sense of urgency was crucial now. Standing still could mean losing everything. Should we check it out? Daniel asked, eyes darting between the door and Jane. No. We need to focus, Jane asserted, her instincts propelling her forward. Ethan's threats were already real, and now they're escalating. I want to let fear dictate our next move. Each word felt like an incantation for courage, a reaffirmation of her emerging identity. Daniel met her gaze, and in that instant, she could see the respect crystallizing in his eyes. It fueled her determination and solidified her role as a leader, something she had never truly embraced before. Let us get our evidence and prepare our strategy, she instructed, determination weaving through her voice. We're not backing down now. As Jane looked at the evidence files spread across the table before them, her mind raced. These were more than mere documents. They were the catalyst for change, the key to toppling the very foundation of corruption that Ethan had built. The knowledge that her fight had significance beyond her personal grievances ignited a fire within her. She was embracing her pain, her fears. They were now her armor against the chaos. Ethan's arrogance will blind him, Jane thought wickedly, her mind detailing an outline of their impending confrontation. She had always doubted her capabilities, her ability to incite real change. But the shifts in her public stance were echoed by shifts within. If she could galvanize the people behind her, she might harness their collective energy against the shadow Ethan cast. Clarity of purpose strengthens me, she murmured, barely above a whisper yet laden with conviction. Suddenly her ambition felt like more than a personal quest. It was a mission of rectification, a bridge towards a future liberated from fear. Still, the crash outside pulled her thoughts like a taut string threatening to snap. Stay alert, she cautioned, unwilling to let distractions divert them. We need to execute this with precision. Clara's voice quivered as she said, what if they try to intimidate us further? It was a valid concern, a reminder of the personal stakes. This isn't just about survival anymore, Jane answered, her focus solid. It's time to draw the line between us and him. We will stand firmly grounded, not just for ourselves but for everyone he has wronged. It seemed almost poetic. She started to envision her chaotic life transforming, gaining shape as she navigated through the intricate challenges that loomed before her. Each choice now was intentional, deliberately crafted to amplify her emerging power. Let us move, but with intention, Jane commanded, aware that the encounter with Ethan would be a turning point. Change was rarely born from comfort. It sprouted from a realm of strife, and she was prepared to face it head-on. As they stepped towards the door, another crash echoed nearby, reverberating through the floor as if the very walls themselves were trembling in anticipation. Jane's heart raced, but so did her resolve. Whatever happens, we want to yield. The air thickened with anticipation, and with each step she took, Jane could feel her power consolidate. This was not merely a confrontation, it was a declaration. The oncoming storm might threaten to swallow her whole, but it also held the promise of renewal. With her hands trembling on the doorknob, Jane inhaled deeply, clearing her mind of every doubt. It's time to confront what lies beyond, she whispered to herself, the determination wrapping around her thoughts like armor. And just as she pushed the door open, a chilling thought ignited her instincts. What if they weren't alone? The door creaked open, revealing a dim corridor bathed in flickering light. Jane's breath caught in her throat as she squinted against the shadows, uncertainty swirling in her gut like a storm. The aftermath of their last interaction with Ethan surged in her mind. His smirk felt like a weight on her chest. Had they underestimated him? Stay close, she murmured to Daniel and Clara, pulling them in. The darkness felt suffocating, pressing against her resolve. It was a tangible reminder of her past, of all the times she let fear guide her choices. She mentally shook off the chains that once bound her. This was a new Jane, one who refused to be a mere spectator in her own life. As they moved down the hallway, the sound of footfalls echoed ominously. Goosebumps prickled her skin. It felt like they were being watched. Memories flashed through her mind, each hesitance, every missed opportunity overshadowed by Ethan's looming presence. This wasn't just a fight for justice. It was a battle for her self-worth, and she couldn't afford to falter. Suddenly Daniel stopped, his face pale. I think I heard something, he whispered, anxiety threading through his voice. Whatever it is, we have to keep going, Jane urged, steeling herself. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears, but the instinct to confront her fears won over panic. It was in moments like these that she realized clarity forged strength. She could feel the weight of the files tucked under her arm, the evidence a tangible reminder of the truth they possessed. They pressed on, each step resonating with determination. As they navigated, the whispers of doubt faded, replaced by an emerging clarity. Jane's inner dialogue shifted. This was no longer about avenging wrongs, it was about owning her narrative. The shards of shattered glass echoed her resolve. Every fragment represented an obstacle, and with each step, she refused to let them define her. Once they reached a small office space that smelled faintly of mildew, she paused to gather her thoughts. Here, she said, pointing to a desk cluttered with outdated files. This was Ethan's space. If we can find anything concrete. With barely a glance, Clara began rifling through the papers. Jane's attention drifted outside the window, where she could faintly see movement in the alley below, a murky silhouette shifting among the shadows. Was it Ethan? The thought made her stomach twist. Did you find anything? Jane asked, her voice firm, as if commanding the very universe to align in their favor. Nothing solid yet, but if we can get a digital record we might have our smoking gun, Clara replied, a hint of excitement breaking through her earlier trepidation. Then keep looking, Jane said, her mind racing forward, already strategizing their course of action. Navigating this labyrinth of deception drove her. Each alleyway in her mind mapped out to lead to confrontation and resolution. As the minutes passed, Jane couldn't shake the sense of pending dread. Her instincts prickled. Something tangible hovered just out of reach. The confrontation with Ethan began to take on a new shape. This wasn't merely about principles anymore. It was personal. Daniel, she said suddenly, turning to him. What would you do if you discovered something truly incriminating? His eyes widened, and for a moment, she saw the fear and anxiety that pulsed beneath the surface. But he steadied himself, the instinct to protect overpowering. I'd confront him. No backing down. Her heart raced as a surge of realization washed over her. We need to plan this out, she said decisively. If we catch him unaware, we stand a better chance. The vision of her confrontation solidified in her mind. She needed to channel every fragment of terror she had felt into determination. I need you both to trust me, the stakes are higher than ever, she added, her voice steady. A pull within her sensed that the gravity of their choices would shape the course of their lives. Suddenly, another crash resonated from the hallway, stirring the air thick with tension. Get down, Jane commanded, adrenaline flooding her system. As they ducked behind the desk, her mind raced through every possibility. This was the moment that would either bind them together in victory or shatter everything she had fought for. Outside, the shadows crept closer. The moment of confrontation edged nearer. What awaited them in the dark was uncertainty, but it also promised a revelation Jane had long desired. Would she finally emerge from the shadows of her past? The crash echoed through the small office, amplifying Jane's heartbeat as she crouched behind the desk. A surge of urgency coursed through her veins, a primal instinct igniting her mind. Every training session she had endured, every confrontation she had avoided, they all converged at this critical juncture. There was no choice now. Confrontation was the only option left. Daniel and Clara looked at her, their eyes wide with fear but also sparked with a flicker of determination. Jane took a deep breath, her thoughts racing. This was not simply about Ethan's threat. This was an opportunity to dismantle the fear that had held her captive for so long. If clarity forged strength, then this was the forge of her transformation. Stay quiet, she whispered, her voice barely rising above the tension that filled the room. She collected herself, acknowledging that fear was natural, but how she managed it would define her. Slowly, she inched her way to the door, peering out into the dim corridor. Was it truly Ethan out there? Or was it merely a tactic meant to rattle them? Where are you going? Clara hissed, gripping Jane's wrist. I need to know what we're up against, Jane replied, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. This wasn't blindly charging into danger. This was mental preparation, harnessing every fragment of fear into tactical awareness. Moving cautiously, she pushed the door open just enough to see into the corridor. Shadows danced unsettlingly, but the hallway remained vacant for now. Cautiously, she signaled for Daniel and Clara to follow her. One instinct woven into the fabric of her determination propelled her forward. She would not be a mere pawn in this perilous game. As they made their way down the corridor, Jane's mind began sifting through past experiences. Each regret morphed into lessons, and she felt the weight of time pressing against her. Would she still allow the shadows of her past choices to suffocate her? This confrontation was not just about Ethan. It was about claiming the agency she had relinquished. "Do you think he knows we're here?" Daniel whispered, his voice taut with anxiety. "Maybe," she replied, granting an understanding nod. "But that doesn't matter. We were right to come." With conviction, she felt the stakes crystallize. Yes, every aspect of her mortal reluctance was creeping back into her consciousness, but those very fears fueled her. Pushing through the dimness, they reached another doorway slightly ajar. The atmosphere thickened, weighted by an inexplicable tension that felt alive, almost suffocating. She thought again of all the hesitation she had felt over the years, those precious years of isolation void of courage. Fighting to break free from that stagnation, she resolved anew. "On three." Jane breathed out, her voice resolute as she gathered her allies. 1, 2, 3. Together, they burst through the door into a small storage room filled with boxes stacked precariously, the faint scent of dust and stale air lingering, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on a nearby desktop computer blinking to life, its screen a beacon of possibility. "Clara, see if you can access the files," Jane commanded, her tone instilling urgency. It was their only chance to gain the upper hand, to uncover the truth buried beneath the weight of deception. As Clara dashed toward the computer, Jane turned her focus back to Daniel, who was visibly apprehensive. "You okay?" she asked, concern threading through her determination. "Yeah, just hadn't he expected to be this close," he admitted, revealing a glimpse of his vulnerability. Jane understood, for she mirrored the same sentiments. The fear they faced was not just external. It intruded upon their very selves. "Remember why we're here," she said, steadying her voice. "This is about more than just confronting Ethan. It's about reclaiming what we've lost." The power of her words re-energized her. She felt a shift within him, the tension in his shoulders easing as he nodded in agreement. The air thickened further, heavy with impending confrontation as Clara's fingers danced over the keyboard. Suddenly, Jane heard a noise, a low murmuring that coiled around her thoughts. Only fragments of words reached her, thick with a sinister edge. "Ethan?" Jane's heart raced as realization hit her. He was closer than they'd anticipated, leveraging his power directly against them. This was it, the moment Jane had been waiting for, demanding presence and relentless commitment. "Clara, hurry," Jane urged, her voice raw with urgency. With each passing moment, the stakes amplified. She could almost hear the echo of her past call her back. Would she face Ethan as an implicit victim or stand defiantly as a determined adversary? As Clara's fingers flew, Jane braced herself for the confrontation that would resound through her life. The moment of truth was looming, and though uncertainty thrummed in her chest, she was unyielding. She had come too far to back down now. The shadows along the corridor whispered of confrontation, and Jane steeled herself. What awaited her on the other side would not only dictate their course of action but irrevocably alter the fabric of her identity. She inhaled deeply, drawing her resolve around her like armor. "Let us finish this." Jane stood poised at the cusp of her transformation, the air thick with tension as she faced the crumbling remnants of her family's legacy. In the heart of that dusty mansion, she had peeled away layers of deceit that had long shackled her lineage and stifled her own identity. Armed with knowledge, determination, and unexpected allies, she had arrived at a pivotal chapter not just for herself but for everyone who had been oppressed by the specter of manipulation. The tension in the room when she confronted Ethan was palpable, but Jane felt an unexpected calm flow through her as she recalled the groundswell of support she had sparked among her neighbors. Each voice that joined her, each nod of agreement she felt, fortified her resolve. She was challenging more than just a man. She was rewriting the narrative that had oppressed her family for generations. "Your days of manipulation are over," she declared, the conviction in her voice echoing in the dimly lit room. She could sense Clara and Daniel move closer, their presence morphing her determination into a solid wall of support. The gathering murmurs of disbelief transformed into murmurs of support, knitting together a tapestry of hope and strength that had long been neglected. Ethan, cornered by the collective force of their resolve, struggled to maintain his composure. Jane stood her ground, the revelations she had unearthed swirling through her mind. She had dared to delve into those dusty letters, navigating through heartache and betrayal, all to arrive at this moment. Recognition flickered in her chest. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stood outside those gates, but a force to be reckoned with. As she presented the evidence they had meticulously gathered, the gravity of her words struck like thunder, underscoring the repercussions of his actions. Each transaction detailed here not only reflects your deceit, but highlights the broken promises that have kept our community on this path of decay. This is not just about you anymore. It's about reclaiming our dignity. The silence that followed was heavy yet electrifying, thick with anticipation. Each person in that room had witnessed their potential unfold, just as Jane had. The resolve she had ignited in them was tangible, emanating from the walls like pulse beats of a collective heartbeat, a heartbeat that she sensed flowing through her veins. After a long taut pause, David's voice rang out, disrupting Ethan's attempts to regain control. "You will answer for this, Ethan," he confidently declared, aligning with Jane's movement toward accountability. The moment shifted noticeably. Jane recognized the dynamic of power beginning to realign. Every fragment of her journey, the sleepless nights, the battles waged against her insecurities, had converged into this singular transformative moment. She had dissected the chains that had once held her down and forged a new link in her familial legacy, one of bravery and resilience. When Ethan attempted to cast doubt on their findings, the collective energy within the room pulsated, pushing against his facade of confidence. Jane had done it. She had summoned a united front, and the echoes of their resolve resonated louder than his threats, eroding the very foundation of his power. The confrontation that followed was fierce yet illuminating. As smaller truths began to peel away from the shadow of Ethan's deceit, Jane watched the turning tide of justice emerge. It was a battle of wits and will, and she finally stood as the architect of her future, no longer relegated to the sidelines of her own story. As the meeting concluded and the room began to disperse, Jane felt a rush of newfound pride envelop her. Not just for redefining her narrative, but because she had gained the clarity to lead herself and others toward a brighter, empowered future. She turned to Clara and Daniel, gratitude swelling within her. "We've done it," she said, her voice steadier than ever. From that day forward, Jane became a beacon of hope in her community, ushering in dialogues about transparency and integrity while confronting injustice head-on. The mansion that had once felt like a melancholic reminder of her past now morphed into a symbol of affirmation of reclaiming lost legacies and weaving together a brighter, collective future. With her heart finally unshackled, Jane looked ahead with unwavering confidence. She had achieved more than she had ever imagined, stepping into her role not just as a daughter reclaiming her legacy but as a leader forging a path for those still caught in the shadows. Now that you've experienced Jane's empowering journey of self-discovery and resolution, you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Jane's incredible resolution. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and witness their own potential for transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share.